Hey friends, before we get into this episode, just a quick reminder that today we are talking about body safety, we're talking about abuse, and we're talking about a lot of topics that may be triggering and definitely not for little ears to hear. So just a reminder to make sure that you listen to this podcast with your earphones in or when your children aren't around. And if any of the topics are just feeling too heavy or triggering, please know it's okay to turn off the episode, to come back to it later, or to skip past parts. We just believe that this topic is so important and really, really matters that we understand it as parents and educators so that we can support our children. And we are excited yet aware of how impactful this topic can be as we get into this week's episode.
Welcome to Robot Unicorn, hosted by my parents, Jess and Scott. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
Let's move back to what your notes have for us here.
Let's do that.
So you talk about how kids have two hardwired needs. Mm-hmm. And you take this from Dr. Gabor Mate's work, I think from The Myth of Normal. He talks about how kids have two hardwired needs: attachment, so the bond they have with their caregiver, parents, whatever, and authenticity, expressing their true selves, and how abusers tend to force kids to sacrifice that authenticity to keep their attachment with them intact. So how do kids choose between attachment and authenticity, and how do abusers use that to their advantage then?
I got goosebumps as you were saying this because it's always one of my favorite topics because it just relates to everything.
Yeah.
Children have two main needs, attachment and authenticity. But the first is always attachment. So attachment is, do I have that relationship that I feel is like going to keep me safe to this person who I'm bonded with? We always are going to choose attachment, but we can't have true attachment, like true, rich, meaningful, powerful attachment without also being our most authentic selves, right? And this is true for everything. This is not just true for abuse.
And we've learned this as adults as well.
Exactly. Like even as an adult with your own parent, if you don't think you can be authentic with them and talk about who you really are, you might not share some of the truest things about yourself with your parent because you worry that will threaten your attachment with them, your relationship with them. So then you don't share these authentic things about yourself, right? And this is true. And this is how abuse can thrive. Because abusers know that a child is going to do anything to keep that attachment with their parent. And so whether the parent themselves is the abuser or someone else, they will use that to keep a child quiet. So what children that I have seen in my practice, my work, have heard things like, this is your fault. So something like the abuser will say something or will abuse the child in any sort of way. And they will say, this is your fault. You made me do this. You made this happen. You wore that little skirt to school or you did this. Because you did that, I had to act this way. And if your parents ever find out, oh boy, they're going to be really mad at you because you made me do this to you. And you shouldn't have done that. You're gross. You're disgusting. So they will hear things like that. And the child who will do anything to keep that relationship with their parent will go, okay, so I can't ever tell them I did this because I will literally do anything to preserve this relationship with my parent. So then they will sacrifice being authentic with their parent to keep what they believe is the only way to keep that attachment. And that is how abuse happens. And that is how someone like a principal out of school can slowly, and we talk about the process of grooming, right? They have the child, come into their office. They get to know the child. They start to make jokes. The next step is maybe the joke's a little bit inappropriate and the child laughs. Oh, you liked that joke? Then they can switch it on the child. Oh, you thought that was funny? Okay. And slowly, it becomes more and more and more inappropriate to the point where then the groomer, the abuser, can say, well, you kept coming back. You liked it. You wanted me to do this. You were asking for it. And they will start making comments like that. And because this is a child who doesn't know any better, who wants to have attachment, who maybe even in a way that is so confusing to them, likes their groomer, right?
Yeah, I would assume there's the child is receiving attention from someone as well.
Well, and often this might happen over the course of years sometimes. Right? So they've developed what they feel is this very true relationship with this person that's now hurting them. And the person, like I said, will try and confuse them as well. So now I'm confused. I'm worried I'm going to lose my relationship with this person. This person, the abuser, often will tell them hey, if you share with anyone what happened, your reputation's ruined. No one's going to believe you. They're just going to think you're a dumb child. Why would they believe you when I'm the principal.
Yeah, right.
Right? Or the pastor or this or that. And that is how people in power are able to keep that control.
So that is actually, like, how do you know that that's how it's happening?
Well, A, I mean, I've heard this same story over and over, but B, like, this is a very well documented process of how abuse happens. So this isn't just my idea. Like, this is a very well documented process of how people are able to abuse others long term.
Can you walk us through, I guess, the actual process? Like, is there something specific that it just happens every single time? Or is it kind of abusers will pick and choose different parts of the grooming process depending on the child? And
yeah, I mean, it's never going to be the exact same every time, but I think on all the research that's been done, they've kind of made a list of like common steps, which I have here, so I can kind of walk people through that. So stage 1 is often the victim's selection step. So the groomer or abuser, I'm kind of using those words interchangeably right now, often will target children who are eager to please, who are compliant. And this is why training a child to be obedient to authority at all times is just a terrible thing to do. Children who are lonely, like seeking attention. Often, unfortunately, these are children from difficult family backgrounds who have maybe struggles going on at home. And if the abuser knows that, they can kind of like use
they don't have
that.
a close relationship with their parents maybe to begin with, or caregiver.
Yeah, exactly. So they're looking for like kind of those broken relationships, someone who they know is going to keep quiet and who they can manipulate, right? Looking for family vulnerabilities as well. And often if it's not, let's say, in a school setting or a coach or, pastor where they can kind of be alone, like a lack of supervision, like this person might start to be like, I'll babysit your kids, and like looking for opportunities to be alone with them. Stage 2, so first, like they kind of pick out their person, and are they intentionally like realizing that this is what's happening? Maybe not even at those beginning stages, but there's like something in them that's like looking for this power control over this child. So the second stage is gaining access and isolation. So often, and again, not always. So I don't want to say like not every person who tries to volunteer and spend time alone with your kids is trying to groom and abuse them. But often these people will start to offer free help, try and look for times when they can be alone with the child. And that's the key thing, right? Because you can't do this abuse in public most of the times, So how can I gain access to this child and be alone with them? So in terms of like a principal at a school, well, okay, I can give the child a job in my office, so they have to keep coming back. Or maybe this is the child who routinely gets sent to my office and is with me here. A coach, we see this a lot in like teams. If a child's being abused in like a team sport, it's like, hey, you need extra practice. Like I'll give you one-on-one lessons and you can come and I'll coach you by yourself, that kind of thing, right? So how are we isolating the child? Now, stage 3, this is really about I'm developing trust. I'm like making this person trust me. So we often see these people are very charismatic. They, might be silly or funny or playful or do whatever they need to do to help the child want to spend more time with them. And this is eventually what becomes very, very confusing to that person is like, I wanted to spend time with this person and they abused me. And there's often, and we don't talk about this, but like a grief and loss of that relationship after the abuse starts happening. And that's why it takes them so long to say anything.
Well, and because they are charismatic, usually the community, again, has a hard time believing that it's even possible for that person to have done anything.
Yeah, and often this is the person who's like super, super friendly to the parents and funny and has this personality, right? They don't often look like, quote unquote, the creep that you're like maybe picturing. Mm-hmm. They often look like someone who, everyone loves that guy. What do you mean? He's so funny. Of course, yeah, you take my kids. Like they have this like charismatic personality. And so they're kind of becoming this person that no one would suspect. And that's what you were saying already, Scott's like, you hear that all the time. Like, I would never have thought. Right? Yeah. And this is, again, kind of like a preemptive defense so that if abuse ever happens, no one's going to believe it.
Oh, yeah. You have that written right there.
Yeah.
Huh.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this is not even just is this for abuse of any kind? Yeah. This is any kind of abuse. This is not just sexual abuse. So it's like exactly what you were talking about.
But I guess you're talking about grooming, though, these are the stages.
Right. But this trust development for other people, that happens in all cases of abuse, right? Where we want to keep abuse quiet. So whether even that's like physical abuse.
Is that true? I feel like some people are just terrible human beings and people aren't surprised that they are abusing.
So maybe not all cases of abuse, but this often happens with abuse that's happening like within a family home and you're trying to keep it quiet. Like the parents might be very lovely and charismatic people and everyone loves them.
Super friendly.
loves and trusts them,
Quiet
and
and
super
friendly.
friendly.
Yep.
Meanwhile, at home, this is what's happening. So then if the child says, well, hey, this is what's happening in my house, people are going to be like, I know your parents, like they would never do that. So it's a very common kind of part of abuse process. So this is the part, stage 4, which is the desensitization, which is kind of where we had jumped ahead to, which is this gradual escalation. Often will start with like an innocent touch. Like the person will start to like touch the child's shoulders or like give them extra hugs or like tickling, stuff like that, where it's not necessarily like sexual touch in any way, but like, how does this child handle this touch, right? We're just going to see. And if the child handles the touch fine, okay, so now we can like move on to the next stage. So it, in a lot of cases, follows a pattern as similar as that, or like a snuggle on a couch or whatever it is. There might be jokes. And so the jokes might start to be like, at first they're playful and then they turn dirty, like dirty, inappropriate jokes. It might be showing a child inappropriate pictures or talking about, you know, their sex life with someone else inappropriately to the child or youth. Like often this happens with youth as well, right? And these are all little testers to see, you know, how do they take this?
Right.
And if they're quiet and compliant, and because if the child says something like, oh, this person was tickling me, you know, okay, well, now I know I can't go any further because this child's already told their parents this and I can kind of get out of it because I have this personality and they trust me, whatever. But if the child's not saying anything about these little things, then that's where they start to escalate. So that's where it's really important for parents to know and be able to like have those conversations with their child about any sort of thing that's uncomfortable, jokes, all of these kind of things. So that if we hope that a child's never even going to be in this situation, we can identify red flags really, really early on and not let it ever progress any further than that, right? And then in this whole desensitization stage is often where the abuse starts to happen, right? And let's just be clear, telling dirty jokes to a child, like that is a form of a sexual abuse, right? Like we talk about this in the body safety course, but there's many different forms and we often don't even recognize that. But I just want to be clear about that as well. It's never okay. So this is where kids are getting like very confused. The touch is starting to happen. It might start to happen more often. And then the next stage.
It seems like they're trying to blur the line between what's appropriate and inappropriate just to completely confuse the child then. They have no idea what is okay and what's not. Yeah.
And the whole time they're also still doing this trust development. Right. And that's why it's so confusing for a child, right? And this is in like a typical grooming process. I mean, like sexual abuse can happen in different ways as well, right? But this is like, that's what we want to talk about today is this grooming process. And so the line between safe and unsafe touch is getting blurred. Child's getting really confused. Abuse is happening at this point if it's not stopped, right? And then the last stage, and this is the stage that's like so heartbreaking, is this post-abuse maintenance. So often the abuse is not just once. You know, when you hear, you know, when I was reading through all these articles about these different principals, vice principals, teachers, you know, all of these different things in the news, it's often not just like a one-time thing. They target individuals who they can do this repeatedly to. And the individual often keeps coming back because there is that relationship, but then there also becomes this fear, right? And that's where Gabor Mate's work really matters, the attachment versus authenticity. This is where the abuser in stage 5 starts saying things like, if you tell anyone what happened, no one's going to believe you, you're going to be alone. Like they'll like use their fears. They might say things like, let's say they're on I'm thinking like a travel sports team, or like they've like worked really hard and this is their coach, because I often hear about it with coaches. All this work that you've done to get this far, you know, in soccer, let's say, is going to be thrown out the window because if you say this, no one's ever going to believe you. You'll be kicked off the team. So this is where the manipulation really comes into effect. And it's very difficult if you've gone this far to not believe that it's your fault, because you trust this person and now this person's done this to you. You're very confused and they prey on all of your weaknesses to make you stay quiet, especially your desire for attachment and belonging. And so this is where I think obviously the abuse is very traumatic, but I think a lot of the trauma also comes from this maintenance phase where you're staying quiet and you're not sharing how you feel. And again, like you mentioned, this is not always in these stages, but this is what's been pretty well researched in terms of like the bigger question, which we were asking at the beginning of like, how does this even happen? How do kids stay quiet? Like, why don't people just say what's going on? Well, it's not that easy.
No.
Right. And I think you can relate to like like, again, you said you haven't been sexually abused, but the abuse of like the confusion and the staying quiet and not saying anything and like the attachment authenticity. Like, I think there's pieces of that you can relate to.
Yep, for sure.
And it's very confusing and it makes it very, very hard to say anything.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in my life, being an adult, I understand it because I think people don't want to believe that someone they know or like or trust is capable of doing these kinds of terrible things to children. Mm-hmm. I think it's, in general, humans want to see the best in others when they can.
Yeah.
So this makes you have to do a complete 180 on something that is just ingrained in us, maybe. I don't know. So yeah, I can see it being difficult. Or I understand now why it is difficult for people to believe that someone who they thought was just the sweetest person ever could do something so completely terrible.
Yeah, it's hard when you want to see the best in someone. And if a child's saying it, you're kind of like, oh, well, you're just a kid, you know, like, what do you know? Or, you know, you're just a youth who has a chip on their shoulder, right? And when we do that as adults and we don't listen, you know, to when kids are coming forward, we are part of the problem that perpetuates this abuse and keeps it happening. So I think it's important for us as adults even. And there was some stat, and I wish I had listed it here, because every time I talk about this and like believing kids and listening to them, there's always that one person who says like, well, you know, when I was young, there was someone who accused a principal and he never did anything wrong and it was all her fault or whatever. Like, there's always that one story.
You have that here.
Did I actually read it?
By children. Less than 1% of reported cases are false allegations. Peer-reviewed false allegation rates sit at 2 to 8%.
Okay, so I did have it. Yes, exactly. Okay, so less than 1% of reported cases, is it actually a false allegation?
Really? So I see that's written there, but I want to read more on that. Because again, that's another thing that I feel like it challenges what we, I think, grew up being told. Mm-hmm. If it's even 2 to 8%, that's a pretty significantly low amount of false allegations.
I remember learning that early on when I started teaching this, because I even had that bias when I came into teaching this, that, well, you know, a lot of times kids just come forward and it's not actually true. But the research does not back that up. It backs up the fact that in the overwhelming majority of cases, if a child is saying, you know, I have been abused by this adult, there is truth to it. And so I wonder where that myth even came from, that we all believe like, oh, you know, we can't believe children. And then, like, for me, as someone who understands children and child development, like, it makes sense. Like, the amount of bravery and like courage it would take to even say anything, and how that could truly threaten like attachment, relationships, all of these things. Why would a child lie about it? On the off chance that they do, we still have to get curious about what would make a child lie about this kind of thing. You know, it doesn't make sense that they would say something so untrue. Unless they're like, you know, 3 years old and they are just trying to process and make sense of like their life. You know, I mean, I would still obviously want to get curious about a 3-year-old, but I remember one time our 3-year-old was saying something about something at daycare and it like made no sense whatsoever. And it was more like she's just trying to process what we're telling her about people touching her body or not touching her body, right?
Yeah.
But if you have like a 7-8-year-old child who's coming forward, I would take them serious and I would really listen to what they're trying to tell you. Hey friends, so at pickup last week, our daughter asked Scott a truly kind of tricky question in front of her younger siblings. Scott was telling me that when he heard a question like this, he used to panic, but this time he had a plan. And he said to our daughter, "Thank you for asking. Let's talk tonight when we've got privacy." And that's a line that he learned straight from our new body safety and consent course at Nurture First. So this new body safety and consent course is taught by me. So Jess, if you listen to this podcast, you know me. I'm a child therapist and a mom of 3, and I have taught body safety and consent education for years. This course takes all my years of experience teaching this education and gives you calm, age-appropriate language for body parts, consent, and boundaries. You'll learn how to teach your kids that no means no. You'll learn how to teach them to read facial cues. You'll talk about safe and unsafe touch, and you'll even teach them about their uh-oh feeling. There's guidance inside this course for the real life stuff, like tickling that goes too far, and even the difference between a secret and a surprise. We made this course at Nurture First because research shows that body safety education helps kids speak up sooner, and we want that for our family, for Scott and I, but also for you. So check the course out at nurturedfirst.com/bodysafety, and to save 10%, use the code ROBOTUNICORN. And just full disclosure here, we are the creators of this course, and we're so proud of it.
Okay, so what warning signs should parents be looking out for then, based on what we've talked about here? Because that's I asked you that originally, if there are warning signs.
Yeah.
Is it impossible to tell? Are we just being naive? I kind of like to know what the actual warning signs could be that would just be red flags for us.
Yeah. So I will tell you some warning signs with the caveat of like, just because someone's done this one time does not mean that they are like a groomer abuser, but we're more looking for like patterns in behavior and, overall gut feeling as a parent too. I think sometimes we don't trust our gut feelings. We're like, well, everyone says they're a great coach or they're a great teacher, they're a great principal. And I remember even like this principal situation, this one person who was messaging me, this was her child's principal, like what started this whole thing. And she was like, yeah, and now that this has happened, all the teachers are like, oh, yeah, we always kind of wondered, we always had kind of like a weird feeling about him or whatever. And it's like, that's when you say something. And also,
It's literally a law in Ontario, I learned today, that apparently in the province of Ontario, it is required for everyone, professionals especially, but everyone, to report anything.
But the thing is that when no one says anything, everyone thinks it's just fine. Oh, it's just me. I always had a weird feeling about that person. But
I mean, you don't want to falsely
Right, you don't want to
say
falsely
something.
accuse someone, right?
Yeah.
So it is tricky. And I keep thinking about this in terms of these cases and like, all these people that you hear about who've done like these mass quantities of abuse and it was just never reported. But then later you hear, oh yeah, well, I had a feeling, or yeah, this is why.
But I feel like you hear so much the opposite too. Like what I said at the beginning, you hear people saying, I had no idea. They would never have guessed.
Yeah. So it is hard to know.
So are there
But
things
there
that
are
we can
some
look
warning
at?
signs. Yes, there's some things that we can look at. So this is the one that I was going to say, like, don't label everyone as a groomer abuser, but seeking one-on-one time with a child where like it maybe doesn't make sense that they always need to have that one-on-one time and like the relationship doesn't really like warrant it. Right. So I'm thinking like a coach, for example, who's constantly like, oh, let your child stay late after practice. They can help me clean up, or they can help me do this, or, hey, do they want to volunteer on this day and like help me set up this thing for, and like they're constantly seeking opportunities that they're not seeking with other people, let's say on the team, to be alone with this person. That would be something that I would be like, interesting. No, you don't really need to be alone with my child like all those times. Right. Or even let's say the principal teacher situation, right? Where they're like, oh, like I'd love for your child to like, stay after school with me and I'll personally teach them this thing. But they're not.
Is that what's happening though?
It might be like, I think in one of the cases I was reading, it was like helper. Like they like wanted this child to like help them with certain like tasks that they had. And they kind of like put this child in this role of like helping, but that's when a lot of the grooming was happening. So it's like, they'll find kind of sneaky ways to like get alone, and it might look like, oh, they're like being very altruistic and kind and like they want to give this special opportunity to just my child. But if that's constantly happening, I'd be really curious about it, especially if it's like special treatment compared to everybody else, right? Where it doesn't really make sense.
Yep.
Sexual comments disguised as jokes when it has to do with people who are underage, or it's even like any kind of comment that feels inappropriate. Like I'm thinking about someone who I worked with who would say that this person who ended up being their abuser would always comment like how beautiful they looked that day, or how, oh, wow, that's like a really nice dress on you, And it's not necessarily even starting out as sexual.
Right.
But they'll praise the child to help them feel really good about themselves in a way, again, that's targeted and not necessarily like about everyone else. And also just in general, is this a person who will make like random jokes that feel like they're kind of sexualized or have like a lot of sexualized conversation? Those are kind of some red flags for me as well.
Yeah.
Excessive favoritism or gift giving. So again, it's like we want to think about like the targeting, right?
Showering them with gifts and attention.
Yeah, or even like it's like a family friend, let's say, but they're always only doing it for like one of your kids and like, always like a special gift or a special treat or special this. And it's like, it's not always, right? So we don't want to see everyone as like corrupts. Like maybe they just like do have a special bond with this child. But if we see like kind of this like targeted favoritism mixed with these other things, mixed with trying to get them alone.
I feel like that's not a likely scenario though, to be normal.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like let's say we have 3 daughters, and if someone were only giving gifts, they know all 3 of them, but they're only giving gifts to one of them. I think we would think that's kind of weird.
Yeah. But, I think also sometimes it can make the parent feel good too, right? It's like, oh, wow, you really get this child,
Right.
and maybe it's your child who's the least understood or something like you really get them, and they'll be like, oh, I want to take them.
Or you have a family and you don't have only one daughter, or you
Right,
only have
exactly.
one son or something like that. Yeah, I can see that too.
Exactly. So oftentimes, like if we are talking about like a charismatic abuser, they're just as charismatic to the parents, right? So then the parents also have to be a little careful of this kind of behavior as well, right? Because sometimes as a parent, the initial like love bombing, which is another word for this, like just praise, 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 also can make you feel good too. And you can kind of be drawn into it as well. Then we might see some boundary pushing, physical contact, like even in front of you, this can happen. So like this person's like always kind of like hugging your child, or, lingering side hugs, or they're tickling your child in a way that like no one else like tickles your child like that. Or they're like, oh, come sit on my lap, and like holding them on their lap. And you just have to kind of be aware of like, does this person do this with other kids? Does this person just do this with my kids? Why are they always like so physical? Like, why do they want my child sitting on their lap like this? Like, this is a little bit odd. And even like you can set those boundaries in your home too. And it's not about like let none of your family friends or whatever like give your child a hug. It's just about, like what's appropriate and what's kind of like testing the boundaries in terms of like physical contact and touch. Secrecy, you might also find that this person is like trying to get your child to keep little secrets all the time. Like, oh, don't tell your parents, but like, here's some candy. Or like, don't tell your parents, but da 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 da. And those secrets might be harmless, but again, they're a test to see, will this child tell their parent? Will they keep a secret or will they not?
Yeah.
So that's again where like the no secrets rule that we've talked about in other episodes is really important. So to be honest, the early stages look like someone being like overly nice, overly involved, overly touchy, like can be part of it. And like I mentioned, not one of these like necessarily alone might just be like, okay, this isn't, except for the sexual comments one. But
I mean, seeking one-on-one time with a child, we were trying to do that with one of our friends' baby daughter and everything too, right? So it's
yeah, exactly.
Or
that's why I'm saying
we wanted her to sit on our lap because she was just so cute.
Well, she's a 9-month-old baby and she's the cutest thing we've ever seen.
She really is.
So, but I think another question that we didn't talk about, which is important, is what makes someone an abuser? Because I think this is also something that's like a bit misunderstood.
In what way?
Well, if you didn't I don't know if you looked at some of the answers I had written here, but why would you think someone would abuse children?
I mean, the only thing I can think of is they're sexual deviant. I don't know. That's they just have messed up views of what they can do or what they want. And I mean, maybe they were abused themselves. I feel like I've heard something about that. But again, all of this is challenging all the things that we heard growing up in the 80s and 90s, right? So then I have no idea if any of those are even true at this point.
So yes, people will often say people sexually abuse children because they were abused as children, but actually there's not as much research to back that up as you would think. That's like not the leading reason. It can be one of them. We often see that more happen peer-to-peer. So let's say a child's being sexually abused.
So they will do this.
And they might do the same thing that's happening to them to another child to try to make sense of what's happening to them. So when I see a child abusing another child peer-to-peer, which is a whole other discussion we can have, then I wonder to myself, well, what's happening to this original child?
Right.
They don't necessarily know to do this behavior unless it's being done to them. So that's actually very concerning to me when that happens. And it will be looked into because you have to report it and everything, right? Yep. But it's not always the case that just because you've been abused as a child, sexually abused, you're going to go ahead and sexually abuse people as an adult. It could be one reason, but it's not the main one. So sometimes it's a sexual preference and deviance like you were talking about. So, I mean, I have not done all the research on this, but there is research on some people have like a preference for pedophilia.
Is that an excuse for it? Or
absolutely not one of these is an excuse for it. Let me just be very clear. There is no excuse at all for this.
Yep. Okay.
Period. Okay. But I'm just saying these are reasons why someone might become an abuser. So there's
this is more like a mental illness.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's the sexual preference. They have a sexual preference for children. They often put themselves in jobs where they now work with children. And now they're put in all of these situations, very high, like alone. They're vulnerable. They're with them. They have the sexual preference for them. And then I guess can't control is not necessarily a good way to put it, but they don't control their impulse and they think that they can get away with it.
Right.
So then there's also another reason is a need for control or power. So this we see commonly, and this can be obviously traced back to your childhood experiences in kids that had no control, no power as children, and they feel a sense of control and power when they are an adult and they can do this against children. So in those situations, it is often like to seek this kind of grandiose feeling of power and control and like almost like I'm entitled to feel this way and can convince themselves that this is okay behavior for themselves to do. So again, it's like all delusions.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
It's very delusional to feel any of these ways, but these are the reasons why people will explain how they got to this position. And it often, they can make themselves believe that they deserve this or this is okay or the child wants this or there's certain like cognitive processes that they can go through to make them feel like there's some excuse or reason for their behavior and it's okay.
Just have a look of disgust over here as
I
you're
know,
saying
well,
all
it's
these
fair.
things.
It's fair, but I feel like it's important. Like, I find it interesting to think about the reasons someone becomes this way.
Yeah, it's just so hard to understand how, no matter what you've been through, how you could feel that that's still
You have to think about the
acceptable. I
the
don't know.
level of detachment from yourself,
Reality?
from reality. Like the delusion word, I think is really important here, right? You're so disconnected from reality in these situations, right? Often there is like a sex addiction, obsession, fantasy type of thing going on. So you can almost see it as like an addictive behavior in some people, similar to how you'd be addicted to like alcohol or drugs. You know, there's that sex addiction and they need to get that addiction met. And you can't often get that met by other adults. So who can you get it met by? Vulnerable children.
Okay.
I know none of this is comfortable, but these are the reasons, you know. Yeah, their own childhood life experiences, opportunity, like they maybe have the life experiences, they have the need for control, maybe they have some like sex obsessions, and then now they coach a team and they have all these opportunities because they're alone, you know. So these are just some of the reasons. And the key point here is there's not necessarily one specific profile of a person who always does this. And that's why we want to have the broader conversation about it so that we can identify these early stages of grooming. We can know what happens. We can know some red flags and we can know what to teach our children and try and protect them.
Okay. Are we sure we want to air this? I'm not really...
You're feeling very uncomfortable right now.
A little bit, yeah.
Tell me about your uncomfortable feeling right now, because I'm sure everybody has that.
Well, I just wonder, is someone going to want to sit through and listen to this? Because now I can see this is going to be like a 3-part series, probably at least.
Yeah.
At this point. And we haven't even gotten to part 2 yet, right? And it's pretty heavy. And I mean, again, it could just be because of not this type of abuse, but another type of abuse. And having to have lived through that, let's just be real. I think parents who are listening to this stuff are likely already trying their best to teach their children and protect them from these things. Mm-hmm. But it's not going to necessarily protect the kids whose parents just don't give a shit or I don't know.
You know what? I hear you and like I understand how uncomfortable you are because I remember the first time I learned all of this too. Like for me, I've been teaching this for so many years.
Right.
It's so comfortable for me to talk about, and I believe so deeply that the more we talk about it, the more children we can help. Ever since I started talking about these topics on Our Mom Village and Nurtured First, weekly at least, I have people tell me, because I taught this to my child, because I heard it from you, they told me that this was happening and this inappropriate situation was happening and we were able to address it. I have heard literally countless stories over the last 8 years of people who have protected their children by having these conversations with them or who have healed pieces of themselves. Like sometimes having these conversations for someone like you who was abused as a child, as hard as it is to hear, it's also important. Like I know we've had a lot of these, off air, obviously. It's important for you to understand that it was never your fault and you were made to be confused and you were made to feel like it was and you were made to feel like you couldn't say anything. And I think it's healing in a way for parents who have gone through this to be like, oh, it wasn't my fault that I liked the person who was grooming me. It wasn't there is something healing in that to say you were never the problem if you were a child and you were abused. Okay. You know what I mean? So that's also why I want to have these conversations, not just for protecting kids, but also for healing adults who think that maybe they had something to do with it. And people will live with that hurt and that blame for their whole lives often.
Yep.
But when they can learn that this is the process that abusers go through and you were part of that process.
It's quite calculated.
It's calculated and it's manipulative and it's meant to confuse you to your core. And how terrible to be that confused, I think that there is a piece of hope for that for the parents who have been through that to say, and my child's not going to go through the same thing because I'm going to teach them these tools. And you can go back and listen to like previous episodes we've done with the tools, right? So I think that's part of the hope and part of why I want to have these conversations, even though they suck and they're not nice to have and they're heavy. But I don't ever also want to be the one to steer away. Yeah. I hope that people will be able to say, Jess never steered away from a hard conversation because it was going to feel uncomfortable. Now, the hope that we can leave parents with is first, again, knowledge is the first layer of protection. So you have the knowledge now, so that's good. Now that you understand how grooming works, not only is your child going to be harder to manipulate because you're having these conversations with them, you are going to be harder to manipulate. And you might look at things with a little bit more of like I don't know about that eye. And I want teachers to look at things from that eye, clinicians, professionals, everyone. Your awareness is your child's first shield. So your awareness will help you not even let your child get put into these situations, right? Like you start to notice an adult always wants to be alone with your child and you're just like, no, it's okay. Like you can come to our house or no, they don't need to stay late for practice. I'll just take them home. Mm-hmm. So you start to just, not even that you're blaming anyone, but you're like, no, it's okay. Like, no, they don't need to do extra work in the office with you. That's fine. So I think that even those like little things that you're going to notice are going to be helpful for you. And the hope is that it's unlikely that this is going to happen to your child. But if they were ever in this situation, you now are more equipped to be able to support them, help them, listen to them. And again, like I was saying throughout this episode, a lot of times the biggest trauma is not feeling listened to, heard, or understood. Right. So even in the worst case scenario, if something bad happens, you will listen to your child and that will lessen whatever trauma it is that they've experienced. So I think that's all very hopeful and positive.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. Maybe I just needed to hear that too, right?
I think maybe you needed to hear that too. Yeah.
I don't know if I was prepared to have this discussion as much as I thought I was.
Yeah. To be honest, I didn't think about how it might trigger you, but I think it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and it's good to include that in this too.
Yeah.
That way it kind of normalizes it a little bit.
Yeah.
For people. Okay.
Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to this episode with us. As we've mentioned kind of throughout the episode and at the beginning as well, we know that this topic can be really triggering. And if it's bringing up feelings for you, I encourage you to just look around you, remember where you are, remember that in this moment you're safe and your kids are safe. And that as we learn about body safety and abuse and how abusers work, it can empower us and equip us so that we can protect our children and other children as well. Next week, we will be back again. And the final episode of this series is very positive and helps you understand practical things that you can do to support your child and to keep them safe. And Scott and I are very much looking forward to diving into that conversation with you. We'll see you again next week. Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We are glad that you are here. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it interesting, we'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and a review. Scott and I actually sit down together and read them all. A 5-star rating helps us share our podcast and get these important messages out there. Thank you so much for listening, and we can't wait to talk to you again next time.